Welcome, folks. We are on News for this is the resuming of News for Us World's Fringe Division podcast, episode 13. We've been away for about a month from this podcast, but I'm glad we're getting back into it. This is actually one of my favorite subject matter to discuss topics. UFOs, alleged looking glass technology, all sorts of stuff like that. So we're going to be getting started here in a moment. Let me begin our 5 minute countdown. This is going to be episode 13, introduction to the Dan Burisch and Project Looking Glass information. This is going to be a recap on information that was released about 05, 06 ish. So this would be a good one. This is good. And it's important to cover the context. I mean, historically speaking, because there's a lot of different elements to um, this whole whistleblower movement, regarding UFOs that's going on. We got to be mindful that there are pieces of information that may not be accurate, but may be in fact disinformation or misinformation by design. We don't know, but I think it's important to be aware of it. And this may be one of those cases. I can't say for sure, and in my belief, it may be just slightly, but it's good information nonetheless, and it has some good gems in there, even though that some of it may not entirely add up. So that being said, let's begin our countdown. Welcome, folks, to News for Us World's Fringe Division podcast, episode 13, the Dan Burisch and Project Looking Glass information introduction. So this is going to be our first episode covering this information, and it'll kind of be an introduction for our viewers, those that are familiar with the subject, and those that are not. There's got a lot of good information here, although some of it doesn't check out, in my opinion. Some of it does, and some of it is relevant to some of the stuff that we're getting from elsewhere. That being said, context is important for everything that we cover. It's important that people understand the context. Without context, we have no basis for understanding the purpose. So that being said, let us begin. I'm going to start off by starting off with this little introduction article here. And then we'll go from there. And then there's a couple videos. We're going to play interviews with Dan Burisch by Carrie Cassidy. We're going to do this in a two-parter because right now I'm pressed for time. I got a meeting got to be at in a couple hours, so we're going to break this up into two parts. We're going to air part one today, along with a little bit of introduction article and stuff. So let's begin. Let me share my screen.
The Majestic World We Live In by Don Deppeler. This is only the tip of the iceberg about to hit, literally, the world. In a press release dated April 22, 2005, it was revealed that one Dr. Dan Burisch, Ph.D., Majestic 12 employee H-6196-MAJ-E-RET, admitted in a sworn affidavit to Information that will change the way society views many assumed and accepted perceptions of the nature of our planet Earth. The Form 255, 256 and General Affidavit referred to the press release were obtained by myself, after days of negotiation with Majestic 12 to help my family and I in our battle to request asylum in Canada from the U.S., which we reluctantly fled after many months of overt surveillance and unauthorized wiretapping. Our situation in Canada is not the most significant aspect of this affidavit, however. We believe, based on information received from several confidential sources, that this disclosure is part of a series of such disclosures required by the Tau 9 Treaty Conference for the Preservation of Humanity, and that other disclosures will follow. This appears to be the first official, that is, legal, document allowed by the elusive organization known as Majestic 12, MJ12. This group was commissioned by President Harry Truman as a prelude to the passage of the National Security Act of 1947. This is the same act that saw the creation of the Department of Defense and the CIA, not to mention other agencies and regulations. The catalyst for Truman was the crash at Roswell in that year of an extraterrestrial craft that is being denied to this day by the bulk of the employees and occupants of the Pentagon, the White House, the Congress and the media. A few years later, President Eisenhower and a delegation from MJ12 and other key members of the power elite at that time met with representatives of a group of aliens from Zeta Reticuli, and so began a series of treaties with them. The current Tau 9 treaty is but the latest in the series, which are renewed every 9 years on average. Dr. Burisch, who is one of the top negotiators for MJ12 of this treaty, also admits to working on the following projects. Project Preserve Destiny, which goes back to before 1960 and which is concerned with efforts to prepare at least some segments of the human population for the cataclysms expected in the 2012 timeframe. Project Lotus, which is concerned with developing a model to utilize the miraculous Ganesh particle to heal everything from earthly ecosystems to the human body, including cancer. Project Aquarius, which is a top-secret project that was started in 1953 and was set up to accumulate as much data as possible about alien life forms and to distribute the collected information to the relevant authorities. This included Dr. Burisch's work with 1EB, or alien, in helping to find a cure for a neurological degradation suffered by it. Project Preserve Mother, which involved the deployment of the Ganesh particles in the polluted waters of Cabrillo Bay outside Los Angeles, California in an effort to clean up the ecosystem there. Dr. Burisch, a highly religious former seminarian as well as decorated war hero, is deeply concerned with the implications of his work, which includes helping to develop an antidote for Gulf War syndrome despite the rumors that he was an author of such bioweapons. As he himself states on one of the surveillance tapes leaked to myself, I went in there to stop a pandemic. And we did, we stopped a pandemic. There were people still injured by the foolish actions of the committee's team. The Illuminists team within the committee, anyway. It was a rogue military unit's action with mycoplasma that we counteracted. At the time of the initial deployment of the Ganesh particle off the coast of Florida in 2002, an effort to ameliorate the effects of blackwater, a yearly phenomenon involving algae strangling the marine environment in the Gulf of Mexico. Little was known of the effect of this Ganesh particle in a large-scale application. Unfortunately, the GPs tended to exacerbate the problem, not lessen it. Allegedly dozens of deaths were attributed to flesh-eating bacteria that had been enhanced by the GPs. Again, good intentions went astray, and even Dr. Burisch was angry that his discovery had been used without his permission before he had developed sufficient safeguards. The fact is that Dr. Burisch has been not only present but has participated in work taking place quietly behind the scenes that is alleged to help humanity carry on in a future that will be vastly different than what we can imagine today. Ever since the formation of MJ12, this organization has worked to arrange funding and distribution of movies, films, television series, specials and even commercials that have brought the message to the public over the past 50 years that not only are we not alone, there exists the reality that interstellar and time travel does occur, that wormholes or stargates do in fact exist, and that there are cataclysmic scenarios that have a basis in historic and scientific fact. Until now, this has only been entertainment, but many efforts underway in the field of research and development have also taken place that are also to help prepare us for a time of great change. In fact, much of the technology of our computer age comes as a direct result of harvesting the wreckage of Roswell and other crashes to develop the transistor, lasers, silicon computer chips, night vision, etc. We can either thank or curse MJ12 for quietly assisting private industry in making this technology useful in our world of today and the one to come as well. Much of this is now history, and the reader can learn of these things in detail from the vast body of literature contributed by first-hand witnesses and researchers. Yet, for the most part, these researchers seem to be primarily interested in pointing to unexplained phenomenon as a means to generate book sales and other income from speaking engagements, seminars, etc., rather than an honest approach to telling the world of things that may be quite unpleasant to John and Jane Doe but will help prepare them. It could very well be that if the government were to come clean with the public, there would be no mystery for these researchers, no future for speculative and expensive books and magazines. No longer would the truth be a commodity they can mine subjectively and at will. For this reason, expect attacks on this story as its implications sink in. For any reader that may question our experiences, they can take comfort in the fact that the evidence presented here is only in signature form on a general affidavit and decide for themselves if it is real or not. Any further inquiries regarding the authenticity of this document can be referred to the Secretary of State of Nevada, whose office is entrusted with upholding the laws and regulations governing affidavits made in its jurisdiction.
Okay, that was a brief introduction to Dan Burisch and his information. So we're going to go into we're going to do this one as a follow-up next week for part 2. So here we go. We're going to go to right into hold on. We're going to go into what Project Looking Glass is real quick and have the screen reader read over that for us, and then go from there, because I think this is mostly what people are interested in hearing about. I know I am.
The following text is copied from Bill Hamilton's website. The commentary that follows is from my, Bill Hamilton's, source that linked with inside sources and took notes on Project Looking Glass and time travel experiments. With regard to LG, Looking glass. As I understand it, this device, at least 3 to 4 years ago, could not focus on a detailed sequence of activities in the future. In other words, you could not see exactly what would happen, like a series of events. I was told to consider the multiverse idea combined with work by Richard Gott on cosmic strings. The multiverse apparently is accessed when the forward mode is set. I was also told to consider the views provided by LG as one of many potential realities, at least in the future view mode.
And when he says LG,
I have also been
means
told
Looking
that
Glass.
recently there has been an effort made to outfit videotape recorders to be sent forward through the apparatus, thereby allowing the Dark Project people to gain some insight into what may take place. When I heard about this, several questions came to my mind, the most pressing of which was, if a camera were sent forward in time, space, would it be able to record anything other than what was immediately in front of its lens? I mean, what if LG were located in the middle of the Groom Lake facility, and the operators wanted to gain insight into the outcome of a conflict, say in the Middle East? How could a videotape recorder, set to record what was right in front of its lens at that location, gather any data on the Middle East if it were still stuck in the middle of the Mojave Desert when it got to the future? Hell, something important could be happening right behind the camera and it would miss it. A couple of degrees change in camera direction allows one set of events to be seen while another set is completely overlooked, much less events half a world away. To answer this question, my contact was not specific, saying only that cameras did not move, as mass does not change in its perspective to spacetime. However, such an item placed into the injected atmosphere might experience a different time, if only briefly. And cameras could film within the gas or see images in the injected atmosphere as though it were a lens reflecting events in and around the column. I was given to understand that the tilt or positioning of the electromagnets would allow different views or positions in the environment to be reflected in the gas column. I feel confident that at least 2 rings of electromagnets are employed and that the rest of the device is composed of a barrel and the gas injected into the barrel. 2 different sources have indicated that these are the basic components. These magnets spin in different directions, creating a charge of some kind. Then the gas is injected into the barrel. Depending on the direction of the spin, I am sure speed and tilt and a bunch of other factors must also have an effect. Timespace can be warped forward or backwards by long or short distances relative to the present. I have reason to believe that the scientists have completed a map of the exact positions and speeds of the magnets necessary to reach targeted times both forward and back. Apparently, images of the events at different places, relative to the location of the device, can be picked up and in essence reflected off the gas, causing it to behave like a teleprompter or crystal ball, for lack of a better example. But I am not entirely sure that mass does not move, or that mass is not affected. Since I was also told many years ago about an experiment that went very wrong in the early years of the LG project, involving a test subject of some kind. As I understand it, there was significant movement of mass during that experiment, and it ended up with a rather gruesome death for the poor test subject. I originally thought it was a monkey, but I found out that there were many test subjects that got sent through, so I am not certain what kind was involved in the experiment that went bad. However, in my typical reverse logic search for corollaries, this tells me that there must have been many test subjects that made it through just fine. So I am certain that any errors that were made or any miscalculations have long since been corrected. I wish I could offer you more information. For what it's worth, my sources have confirmed the presence of electromagnets and a barrel-like device which is injected with some kind of gas. An independent source has stated that the gas concerned is argon. Project Camelot. These components seem necessary for LG to function as a viewing device. And as for any changes in mass or movement within time-space, I really don't know, since my information sources would only tell me so much about what they saw or experienced at the time they were involved. But it can be reasoned, based upon what they did say, that there were significant experiments in the movement of mass back and forward through time, many of which were successful. I am sure much has been discovered and or refined in the process since then. The following images were created and supplied by Dan Burisch. Note: The unattributed image on Bill Hamilton's website is a movie prop from the movie, The Time Machine.
I'm going to bring up these images in a separate tab, full screen, so we can all take a look at them, and then we're going to segue into this brief article on by Carrie Cassidy, February 22nd, 2021, regarding the Dan Burisch information and Project Looking Glass Revisited. And then we'll play part 1 of this, okay? And then next week we'll play part 2 and go over this PDF as well as a couple other links. So let's see real quick. Where were we? Here we go. This is a artist rendition of the device, the Project Looking Glass device, allegedly based on Dan Burisch's description. Okay. Let's see what we got here. Let's go to this other one. Give you some labels and some information on what each part of the device does. Okay. So basically what they're talking about, from my understanding, I've been researching this particular story. I've heard been at least for the last 12, 15 years. I've been looking into, I've done some thorough looking into it. From my understanding, the Project Looking Glass technology basically uses a gas, argon, and what it does is it uses it's like a gravity, kind of like a gravity device, and it basically warps space time, and at a certain point. And then when you tilt this device, which has like actual refractive lens, it basically you're using the angle and the light, and then the gas acts as a reflector in such a sense. I'm not sure I'm explaining it as well as I could try. Hopefully that's easy for people to understand. Anyways, basically giving you a view into a possible future, and that ties into the multiverse, which has been theorized by some scientists. So there's that. Let's go and look at. Nope, I guess that image isn't there no more. Interesting. Okay. Well, we'll go from here then. Oh, there we go. I clicked the wrong link. That's why. Okay. So this is a side view from it. Okay, apparently. And you have a toriad looking field right here, was what it looks like it's generating, which is how you're creating the gravity dispersion. Front and back view, I believe. Something like that, yeah. And then a burial orientation. So there's like a little, this is where you focus and adjust the direction of the view of the device so you can get a different, apparently. Interesting. And this is a visual of what effect you get frontward on the left. That's on the left when this barrel gets tilted as such. Okay. So basically, it's allowing you to peer into a window, basically, to another parallel or possible future via accessing the multiverse, which would tie into quantum resonance and quantum mechanics, I believe. I know, right? Tell me about it, Jessica. I know. I've been fascinated by time travel my whole life, though. That's why I love this kind of subject matter. Even if it's like nothing we can really verify, I love hearing this information because it really makes you think. I mean, it's fascinating to me. So let's go here and let's go over this article. And then I'll have the screen here to read it, and then we'll play part 1.
Dan Burisch, Stargate Secrets and Project Looking Glass, Revisited. Stargate Secrets, Dan Burisch Revisited, 2 parts. Las Vegas, June 2007. Part 1.
So this interview was taken in Vegas, folks, apparently in 2007. So, my hometown. I'm a local native of Las Vegas, in case anybody didn't know.
Those familiar with Project Camelot's work will need no further introduction to Dan Burisch. In this second in-depth interview, which arose from our having presented him with a long list of questions of our own, Dan goes into great detail about both the technology and the politics of the Stargates and the Looking Glass. He also discusses the cube, which may or may not be the same device as the famed Yellow Book, or the black box, reported by the Project Camelot witness Henry Deacon. In this fascinating interview we found Dan once more to be outspoken, challenging, informed, values-driven, mischievous, humorous, human and likable. We also want to take this opportunity to publish an announcement, as supplied by Marcy McDowell, who works closely with Dan. Marcy asked us to make the following formal statement on Dan's behalf. Dr. Dan Burisch is on a necessary hiatus from official public contact until later this year. Unfortunately, there is very little that I am allowed to say regarding what Dan is doing. We have informed the public that he is not working for Majestic. Majestic no longer exists. Dan retired from that group in September 2006. Majestic sat formally adjourned in October 2005. I can say that Dan's present activities are so important, pressing and secret that those in the new group, the group which took over for Majestic at the end of 2006, the group for whom he has agreed to make himself available, sought him out for this assignment and insisted that he have limited to no public contact until after December 14, 2007. This will provide the time for him to complete his activities with them, and be debriefed from the assignment. His present assignment is national security related. Due to the nature of the assignment, Dan has accepted and been sworn to a national security oath. At the time of the interview Dan was unaware of this, and so this is not mentioned or discussed in the interview. We have no further inside information, but can surmise that at least some of the issues raised in the interview are likely to be connected.
All right, and then we're going to play part one on that article of the interview, and then next week we'll do part two, folks. Oh, and then we have another article we'll bring up here at the end of that, because I want to show that as well.
People will then target toward a date. And there are people out there now that are saying, oh, it's right around the corner at any moment now. Why won't the aliens save us? Yeah. We need to save ourselves. This was a quid pro quo for them to get certain information from that Kaela showed me. I demanded certain information back, and actually it was information concerning the time travel issue, because they were still trying to be, they were still reticent about informing me as to what the real nature of the situation was. As late as 2001, the Looking Glass shows probabilities, or has shown probabilities. The cube would react with the people present. So there was an alteration, if you will, over what you were seeing from it. It would actually spin out as a yellow disc out of the top of it, where the word Yellow Book originally came from. Yeah. Actually, I used that to our advantage at the T9, because that, in fact, was present at the T9, and I projected certain information which caused a little upset during the meeting, but I was also allowed to show them probable outcomes. So in fact, the Yellow Book, the cube, was used for that purpose. Shockingly, they happened to see themselves standing on the bones of their own families and things like that in the vision, and they ultimately decided to remove Lotus as well as certain abductions from the Tau 9 Treaty. They were handing this cube around from country to country to the elitists in the countries to look into their own futures so that they could pick the best paths for themselves. I'm happy to pass along the information. I'm honored to pass along the information that I understand that the Yellow Book is no longer accessible. I will say this to everybody, whomever took it, it's in safe hands and it won't be used to harm humanity.
How would you like to start? What's the best place to start as far as Stargates are?
I've got a list of questions
Okay.
here in front of me, submitted by you two, all 30 of them. And, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned the number.
No.
They are decommissioned. They are separated into their 3 components. There's a projection component, a ring component, and also a barrel component to the both the Stargate devices as well as the looking glass device. The Stargates also have field posts, and again, I'm not a physicist, so I wouldn't be the appropriate one to make comment as to how they work. But there were field posts that were positioned around the actual gates, and they have been stored, I guess. I'm not certain what happened to the field components, but of the 3 components, they've actually been decommissioned, and liaisons to the European Union, the United Nations, and NATO are actually in possession of them, and there is no one group which has the other one of the other 2 components.
Well, okay, so
everybody's staring at everybody, and they're not. They can't put the equipment together because everybody is mutually dependent and looking questioningly at everybody else. So everybody is literally protecting everybody else. Of the actual base operating equipment, there are 3 components to it, which is a projection device of some sort, a barrel, and a set of rings, electromagnetic rings.
Are we able to know how many man-made Stargates there were on the planet?
No. I'm not going to comment as to the total. I will say that there was over 50.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. In different countries of the world?
Yes.
Okay, and these are man-made?
Yes.
Okay, so, and natural Stargates?
Well, see, it's not a Stargate. It's a device which accesses.
Okay.
Which accesses a portal, a wormhole,
Does it access a natural, in other words, the man-made device accesses a natural Stargate?
It draws off from a natural ERB, an Einstein-Rosen bridge.
Okay.
It accesses it and somehow works, from what I understand, not in parallel, but almost like piggybacks on the energy of the natural Stargate. Yeah.
Okay. So, in other words, if there were 50 man-made devices accessing, they would be accessing a corresponding 50 natural energy vortexes.
That I don't know. There's a possibility, in fact, that when the looking glass was operated, they were usually worked in tandem. It required a second looking glass to be turned on at the same time to get acoustics through. So unless a second one was turned on, which was operated at one of the places where Will Uhouse had been, he saw the second node location as opposed to the first node being over at the Papoose facility. Two pieces of equipment, 2 looking glasses, were required to be turned on at the same time to be able to hear acoustics or sound, if you will, from whatever the people were watching, but to go to piggyback in tandem with the visual response of the equipment. That it required 2 to be turned on to hear anything. And then both sides could hear the same thing. So I suppose both of the looking glasses being tuned to the same thing was accessing the same tunnel, if you will, to the information.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was wondering. Okay, so the looking glass has an ability to show one the future, but a Stargate or equipment that accesses a Stargate or wormhole is for time travel, right? We're talking about 2 different things.
Yes.
Are they using the same technology?
Essentially, yes. The original device was the Stargate device. That was then increased in power, if you will, with the use of these field posts. And how it pumped up the power, how it stabilized it, I don't know. You'd need to speak with a physicist about that.
Okay, and
however,
it increased it enough to where it became a looking glass?
Well,
had
no.
The abilities of a looking glass?
No. It would be pumped up in power to stabilize the doorway, if you will, to step through into another location,
Right.
which in essence, because distance and time are relative, the same thing, step two into another time. The looking glass device was a back-engineered Stargate.
Okay.
So it was actually back-engineered from the original cylinder seal data, which
Right.
allowed us to produce the Stargate access devices, if you will, what we call the Stargates. It's a back-engineered device, the looking glass is. So the looking glass is a secondary device, and it was coming into its fore in the 60s and 70s. And Will saw one of the first generations of it. From what I understand, a very large piece of equipment. They always get smaller no matter what. I mean, look at what's happened with the computers.
Will saw?
Oh, yeah.
Will
Uhouse.
Uhouse saw the original looking glass.
He saw one of the original looking glasses demonstrated, and in fact, it's going to be in the DVD that we're getting ready to put out, the actual interview, where he was indicating firing of a bullet, I believe it was, through an object. And there was a time delay where the bullet actually passed through the object, where he saw the bullet past the object, or the projectile, if you will, a rail gun, I believe is what was being, yeah, it was a rail gun that was being used. And then afterward, they saw the impact of the device. So they were already playing with it in the early 70s, early to mid 70s, with dealing with time sequences.
Wasn't the original looking glass a back engineered from alien technology?
Yes.
Okay. But it also, there was information around the cylinder seals that they used as also, and that those cylinder seals also came from an off-world race. Is that not
from well, no, the cylinder seals didn't. The information on them did.
Came from. Which was maybe the Anunnaki? Is that kind of our...
I wouldn't feel comfortable in characterizing it
Okay.
with that name.
Okay.
I really shouldn't go.
But it was off-world technology originally.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And at this point, like, okay, say that was in the 60s, the 50s, the 60s, you said.
Well, yes. That's when they started actually being showing a lot of interest in actually building the equipment to be able to see over the curvature of time-space so that they could see into the future and somewhat into the past, but basically the future.
Okay. So there's also our Henry Deacon contact said there was a black box that came on one of the crafts. And I don't know if you're familiar with that black box. Did you have exposure to that as well?
Yeah,
So
it was something that we called the cube or the yellow disc or yellow cube, yes.
Okay, but then that was not a looking glass. Was that a looking glass?
That is a variant of the technology.
Okay.
However, whilst the looking glass shows probabilities, or has shown probabilities, the cube would react with the people present. So there was an alteration, if you will, over what you were seeing from it. It would actually spin out as a yellow disc out of the top of it, where the word yellow book originally came from.
Yeah.
And depending upon what predisposition, it's kind of like little Yoda telling young Luke, you bring in there what you have with you. You know, whatever is in there is what you bring. You could then change the perspective, the tilt, if you will, the orientation or angle of the information being presented back to you. So unless you are well prepared to deal with such a thing, human interaction and human emotions bring instability of the provenance of the information.
Okay, that's what went on with the black box, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, but with the looking
and
glass...
I use that to our advantage at the T9, because that in fact was present at the T9, and I projected certain information which caused a little upset during the meeting, and they got certain abductions removed and Lotus removed off the calendar and things like that. I caused some real trouble, in other words.
Can you elaborate? Are you willing to elaborate?
the let me sit here and consider what I should and should not. During the negotiations for the Tau 96, I was asked to supply a model for the Lotus. In fact, Marcia and I were both asked because they knew tangentially she was involved. I agreed to do so, which is what you respond when you're a sworn operative. It's yes. Unless there are great objections. I was then taken to the location where the treaty was actually being negotiated. Give a short recitation as to the nature of Lotus. What was happening is the P-45Ks use Lotus. They wanted to use Lotus for the back engineering of their own neurological problem. I was objecting to its use, but still was under orders to provide a model. I was prepared to do so, but I was also allowed to show them probable outcomes. So in fact, the Yellow Book, the cube, was used for that purpose. Shockingly, they happened to see themselves standing on the bones of their own families and things like that in the vision, and they ultimately decided to remove Lotus as well as certain abductions from the Tau 9 Treaty. So we were successful in getting certain things removed. I think I can safely mention at this time, because we're only one OF9 and one Tau 9 Treaty away from the passage through the completion of the passage through the galactic plane. So I think I'm pretty well safe to go ahead and mention it now. They're not going to be able to get it back put on the treaties and all of that in the time that we have left. In other words, they got outfoxed. And that's what happens when you're negotiating in treaties.
So you use the capacity of the Yellow Book or Little Black Box to show them the future implications of what using the Lotus to amplify or to rectify their own biological problems.
This is true, and that was skewed by it takes a great deal of emotion to skew the imagery and the audio that comes with it. But I'll just say that I'm extremely vehement with regard to my objection for the Lotus being used, and apparently that vehemence was sufficient to skew the image enough to get them to jump back aghast and in horror. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So, okay. And this kind of, like, just for the sake of the audience to some degree, you have seen in, I guess, the Yellow Book or in the Looking Glass, and you can correct me which one it is, the future of Lotus, in a sense. How Lotus becomes, once it's brought to the fore by you.
Well, actually, no, I haven't. The reports to me which came concerning the future of Lotus, which we're not going to get into in depth this evening, was given to me as information.
Oh, so you didn't see it?
Personally see it, no.
Okay.
I was told.
I see.
I was told. That was during the early years, I say the early years of Lotus. It's only been going on for 6 years now.
Right.
But this was the latter half of 2001. And this was a quid pro quo for them to get certain information from that Kaela showed me. I demanded certain information back, and actually it was information concerning the time travel issue, because they were still trying to be, they were still reticent about informing me as to what the real nature of the situation was, as late as 2001.
Meaning the real situation was, meaning how much access to STARGATE, to time travel that they actually had?
Right, the treaty, the whole treaty system, the situations involving the treaties, their outcomes, the actual potential for both timeline number 1 and timeline number 2 outcomes. In the case that we're in right now, we seem to be in a variant of timeline 1, and that's good. For everything that I've seen and have read and reported to me concerning timeline number 1, it's not happening exactly the way that they figured that it would. But then again, it couldn't, because we've made changes along the way, which diverted us away from timeline number 2, and in so doing, our future, again, I regard our future as something which is pretty much a blank slate. We're writing it for ourselves. And so we are now seeing something coming to pass which is slightly different than the prognostication, than the probabilities that we were seeing. And I'm good with what we're seeing so far, but you know, we are still faced with the challenges, the environmental degradation, etc.
Okay.
But hopefully we will rise to the challenge.
Okay, so this is interesting because it sounds like Kaela was instrumental in getting you to have greater access to intelligence about what the Looking Glass was telling MJ12.
Yeah, it was the information that he was providing me which provoked questions. And the fact that they didn't even want to get into long-winded discussions with me in the late 90s concerning what he even was. After we had argued for years to find out even where the material was coming from, then we were finally given access to the material. I mean, this went on for a few years.
Okay, but your interaction with Kaela was leading you one way and giving you one set of information, and MJ12 then had another set. Isn't that right?
Well, they weren't really. It wasn't that they had another set of information. He did tell me basically what was going on.
Okay.
And they were simply not providing that information as what they considered a need-to-know situation.
I see. So
they just weren't going to tell me what they didn't feel I needed to know.
But little did they, well, this is my paraphrase, but little did they know that Kaela was basically cluing you in.
He was cluing me in, and he was informing me his perspectives concerning the treaties. I knew something was going on, and that is ultimately what they wanted to know about. And I said, well, for you to know about that kind of thing, then I need to know about certain other things. It's, you know, it was truly a quid pro quo situation, and they said, well, okay, we'll tell you if you tell us. Right. So I told them, and they told me a little more.
Wonderful.
And it was right around that same time that Lotus was actually kicking into fore. The May 31st, 2001 event that took my prosaic project and basically threw it in the garbage can, and it turned into what it is now, this project that it is now. And as a result, I also found out from them where they said Lotus was ultimately destined. And that is, like I said, we'll discuss that in a slightly future date.
But isn't it true to some extent that Lotus could help Kaela now?
That was the perspective of the P45 J-rods, and that is not my perspective.
I see. So, because I make a distinction between Kaela, who's what I understand a P52, and the P45. So, but they're on the same, they were
on the same timeline, the same track, but just separated by 7,000 years.
Okay,
yeah.
So even so,
which is quite a big separation.
What we got, so what you're saying is that in a sense, Kaela couldn't get the benefits of Lotus because...
Nor did he ask for it.
Okay.
Nor did he ask for it. And you know, I will say this. This is something that David spoke with David on the phone not that long ago. I'll leave the last name off. I think you know who I'm...
Sure, but we can use his name if it's okay with you.
Well, sure, David Wilcock.
Okay, yeah, because we just interviewed him.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Yeah. And he was talking. We were discussing the same thing, which was the box, the cube. And I said, you know, a strange thing happened. I was pro tempore made MJ9 for the 12 as a result of a bet that went on within MJ12. And I got a chance to tap who ended up being the last MJ9 prior to the adjournment. And before tapping her, who was the first female to ever set in the 12, I got a chance to look at certain documents and look through certain archives in Washington, D.C. prior to going across to the continent and meeting with some folks and telling them basically I wasn't interested in their offers. I'm talking about a trip to Brussels.
The Illuminati?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And during the same time, the cube disappeared. and it hasn't been seen since. And it disappeared out of the archives. Of course, I have no idea. I have no idea where the item may be, but I do know this: I'm happy that they can't find it, because what they were doing is they were handing this cube around, and this is a question that Bill had asked, whether there was only one cube. They were handing this cube around from country to country to the elitists in the countries to look into their own futures so that they could pick the best paths for themselves. Why don't they just live their lives and try to be good people? Why do they need a little black box to tell them when to jump and how to jump? That's not being fully human, or at least from my perspective and those of our associates. That's not being fully human.
Yes.
So, as I understand it, disappeared. Now, there have been certain, allegations that have been made that during the time when I had, it's almost a year ago now, when I had the bad seizure.
Yes.
It was near the end of last year, was it? No.
I think it was about a year.
It was about a year ago, and I had a very severe seizure and was actually put out of commission seriously for a while. And there was a big hullabaloo to get over to my apartment to get something out of my apartment. What that object was, I won't comment. But I will say this to everybody, whomever took it, it's in safe hands and it won't be used to harm humanity.
All right.
In fact, the fact that it's in safe hands will prevent it from being used to harm humanity. It has been thus far only used, aside from, I've got to try to justify my own behavior in Bandolier of using it for the purposes of skewing to get Lotus off and the abductions off, but I think that was for a beneficial cause.
Right.
But it has been used since actually the 50s by the potentates, by the leaders of the various countries, to skew the history.
Wow, that's amazing.
Of the human race.
Right.
And the common folk, the average people, all of us, have a right to a future which is our own, and not being skewed and designated and promulgated and promoted and provoked by blue bloods who feel that they are above everyone else.
Well, thank you, Dan.
You're welcome.
I think we probably all owe you a great thanks for that. Dan.
No, I'm happy to pass along the information. I'm honored to pass along the information that I understand that the Yellow Book is no longer accessible.
Yes.
That's all I know about it, though.
I understand. I totally understand, and thank you for that information.
That may be the reason too why the Illuminati hasn't done something to us, and it may also be the reason on the other end why the old Magi haven't, and maybe why they're all so quiet. And
Right.
I don't know.
Have the upper hand anymore, in essence.
The people should have the upper hand, and they should have the upper hand for their own destiny, and that's why we too have gone as far as what we have to expose the NSSM 200 report, which was put in during the Ford administration, which I believe was written by Dr. Henry Kissinger, wherein he suggested the possible use of food as a weapon. And its use in fact, as a tool against the third world. Now, at the same time, we notice that there's a correlation going on. You can find this from the IPCC report concerning global warming, that if the world average temperature rises, I believe, between 2 and 3 degrees Celsius, that the northern hemisphere, the higher latitude growth will increase. However, if it goes over that, it will decrease. Yet the lower latitudes, by the way, that's where you find most of the third world countries, the 2 to 3 degree Celsius increase will cause starvation and crop loss.
Okay.
Now, isn't this funny?
Yeah.
How they're just allowing the global warming to increase with the provoking with the use of fossil fuels. I'm not saying that's the total cause. It's not. There are cycles involved, short as well as long-term cycles. But isn't that funny? And it's my best guess that they'll probably order just enough ameliorative steps to be taken where it levels off, where the higher latitude or the higher latitudes probably don't lose their crops, where you find the majority of the rich countries.
Interesting. Well, that's actually a fascinating political observation. I think that it is also interesting that most of the crops are being grown, though, in the lower latitudes. They're not being grown in North America anymore.
Right, but you have sustainability, though.
Sure.
Whereas when you have the loss of the crops in the lower latitude, you're also losing a lot of the population from the third world, which unfortunately, according to the way that the documents read, some people find them expendable.
Right. Well,
we don't feel that way.
That's the Iron Mountain report also talks about things of that nature. And you're familiar with that?
I've heard of it.
Okay. Well, it's freely available on the net to be read. And it talks about that, something very similar to that.
Right. I'm not one that likes to interject myself in politics at all.
No,
I like the state of the research.
But at the same time.
Well, at the same time, I mean, when we start hearing that the codex is being placed in place, which actually delimits food value. Oh, you can have all the food you want and starve to death while you're eating it if there's no nutrients.
Right. Absolutely.
When I start hearing that food is being used as a weapon, and it's being used concerning the use of fossil fuels, I start getting personally angry. There's not one person in the lower latitudes that's worth any less than me.
Right.
You know, everybody is worth exactly the same thing on this earth,
Yep.
And unfortunately, there are individuals who feel otherwise.
I understand. Okay, so Bill, the question you were asking, now that we've kind of, let's talk about, first of all, you mentioned Will Uhouse.
The son of Bill Uhouse.
Son of Bill Uhouse, who's very well known.
Bill
so
who?
we didn't realize that he was actually, it was the son, you were saying,
Yes.
who had access to that technology.
Yes. Bill was the builder of the avionics and the testing equipment. The back engineered ARV testing equipment, the avionics. I actually saw some of the equipment, and this is in the tape that Marcia and I did with him in a room. I actually saw some of the equipment, some of the diagnostic equipment in the B bay underneath the Galileo bay that he actually built. And so when I started describing it, Will looked at me and said, "Oh, that's what my dad built." So we had a very nice little connection there.
So are you saying?
But it's Will who had experience around the looking glass equipment in the 70s. His son, Bill Uhouse's son.
And Will Uhouse is alive now.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
So that's very interesting.
And his wife Terry, they in fact, from what I understand, they met during the course of conversations concerning our information coming to the public. Terry and Will met one another, fell in love, and were married. That makes me feel kind of personally really good.
Okay, well, so it sounds like Will knows quite a bit about what makes the ARV run then, if his father had something to do with the back engineering.
Yes.
Okay, so in 1947, when
Yes.
the cube was discovered, it must have really screwed up the idea of the two timelines by bringing in the ability to, I mean, I don't know what the cube can and can't do.
Well, first of all, the cube was not discovered in 1947. There's a mixture of the stories involved. The cube was actually, the information about the cube, its existence, was known as of 1946. It was further discussed in 1947 after a certain crash in midwestern, lower southwestern state, New Mexico, and following which, during the first brokering for treaties by the Orions with Eisenhower, the cube was handed to Eisenhower. It was in fact expected to go to the United Nations authorities, and it was in fact spirited away by the United States military.
Okay.
They didn't hand it over.
So, but the way you're talking about the cube is that it sounds like it connects emotionally with the viewers in a sense.
It does, and the fact that it was actually Orion technology.
Okay.
And it was handed over by them in the spirit of goodwill, but a misassessment as to our evolutionary state, our ability to handle the issue and handle the equipment. They felt us more balanced than what we actually were.
Okay, well this opens almost Pandora's box in a sense of United States history.
That is Pandora's box. Yes, and I'm not exactly certain what was seen relative to the cube for 9/11. Mm-hmm. However, the analysis which I was asked to do, of course I've paid the price now that I've actually done it. Again, people don't want to hear the answers that I came up with, but the analysis that I did indicated that certainly there's at minimum a great suspicion concerning the delay of response. And the information that I have directly from one of the former seated members was in fact that we were aware, but this was looking glass technology, not the cube.
I understand.
That we were aware as of the middle 1990s that there would be a coming Islamic extremist war with the United States. We were also aware of certain alternative situations that they used the statistics from the looking glass, from the variability between the different pictures, to show that would be occurring at the same time, another probability at the same time. And from their perspective, that the least of the two consequences was 9/11. I am aware of what the other possible consequence was. I'm not willing to come out and start mentioning it because I don't know what the consequences are of speaking the things that have not thus far happened, yet the probabilities existed that they could.
Yeah. No.
So you know, I'm feeling a little bit. There's a little weight when it comes to that, but.
Okay, you're saying though that the looking glasses have been, as you called it, decommissioned.
Yes, ma'am.
And that means across the board.
Across the board.
Okay.
They are shut down.
And you said there was 50 man-made devices, and I'm assuming
I said at least 50
that would access or create stargates, in essence, out of natural vortexes.
Yes.
And
they would suck them in or make them available.
Looking glass, and a looking glass is not the same as a stargate.
No, a looking glass is a back-engineered form from the original cylinder seal descriptions on how to build the units that they made Stargate. So in essence, you could take a looking glass unit and make a couple changes to the equipment, lift it up on an angle, put field posts around it, and open up a hole to step through.
Sure. Okay, but the looking glass can show you the future. So are we saying
future probabilities, not the future?
Okay, so are we saying there were 50 looking glasses in operation as well?
Oh no, there were much less.
Okay.
We had a basic monopoly over the looking glass, that and India. India brokered early on with Indira, when Indira Gandhi was brokering the Committee of the Majority between the United States and the Soviet Union, because the Soviets were threatening to start their own treaty system up with the extraterrestrials, which would have become untenable. We agreed then to expand MJ-12 from a wholly operated and owned American operation to an international operation, and thus was born the Committee of the Majority between 1963 and 1967. And when that information was brokered, that happened in parallel with, kind of under the table, but in parallel with the United Nations treaties involving things like the Test Ban Treaty and the Outer Space Treaty. And so it was being done at the same time under cover of UN support. The diplomats were going back and forth and brokering the opening up so that the treaty system would be a single treaty system and thus tenable and manageable. to hopefully a good outcome. And we'll be knowing within the next few years whether that was successful.
Okay, so this is really fascinating. You're saying that some other countries, India for one, had access to looking glass technology.
Yes, ma'am.
As
They
far back
had that
as-
written in as far back as the 1960s and 70s, when it was actually being back engineered from the Stargate material. And so at the same time that Will Uhouse, for instance, was looking at the early generation looking glass, India had the same.
Okay, and are you at liberty to say what other countries had access to that?
To the information or to the equipment?
To a looking glass, or the ability to create a looking glass and look at time, look forward into their own histories.
No,
Is
because
that without exception?
And I'll tell you why the answer is no. Within the treaties, the looking glass, as well as the Stargates, as well as the cube, and information movement pods, are all contained within the treaty system. Within that treaty system, it also prohibits and allows certain passage of information amongst delegates on where the looking glass material is and where the information flow is, what the access is. Being that I stood in Bandolier, I'm considered a delegate, therefore I cannot tell you.
Okay, so you can't tell me who has
No.
access to that technology.
Aside from India and the United States.
Right. Okay.
No.
So, but we can assume that some countries, perhaps, that is the leadership of some countries, may have had access to this technologies at some point.
I think that it's fair to say that we can assume that they had access to the information from it, but I wouldn't place any characterization over any assumption of whom may or may not have had it.
Okay. All right. Well,
I thank you for the question, though.
Okay, but it also gives you a whole different way of looking at history. I mean, certainly.
Indeed, it does.
You know. I mean, this stuff is got to be, as natural to you as getting up in the morning, and having a cup of coffee. This is all part of your worldview.
Now, there's nothing as natural to me as getting up and having my cup of coffee. I'm sorry.
Okay, but
and we should have never built. We should. The Stargate, yes. Okay, for the purpose of speaking with the visitors from the other timelines, yes, absolutely. The looking glass, no. That was done because of our own shortcomings as people who aspire to things that we maybe shouldn't try to grab a hold of.
Well,
It should have never been built.
Gives you power, right? We're talking about power and the misuse of power here.
Yes.
I mean, bottom line, right?
Yes.
So
and I am an advocate against that misuse.
Right.
In fact, well, I could say against the misuse. I am an advocate against its use, period.
Okay, so let's say that one has the looking glass, and you're saying it shows probabilities. And one of the things we were wondering is, how does it do that?
Well, from the best I understand, and I was speaking with Bill just a little while about it, a little while ago, the rings and the amount of information via energy, which is passed into it, and I've got to be very, very careful with this. The position of the rings, their orientation, the energy running through them, position of the barrel, etc. Because you can raise the barrel up on an armature inside the center of it. All come into play as if you have an onion with the various layers of the onion. As you move through the different energy levels, you also move through the different layers, so you get different bits of information. Now imagine an almost infinite number of layers overlain in comparison to the positions of the rings, and an almost infinite amount of energy that you can add or subtract. Tuning it up, tuning it down.
Well, it sounds
Instead of going up by 1 hertz or by 2 hertz, maybe by a thousandth of a hertz, up and down.
But it sounds like you're working with almost like a kaleidoscope effect. Like a kaleidoscope, a real kaleidoscope. The way you would turn and twist and focus, and each time you get a different design, right?
Well, right, except
time the colors are changed.
Yeah, you get a different design and the colors change, but it's like working with multiple kaleidoscopes where when you find two different probabilities that you would run into, you have two kaleidoscopes, and you make a change on one kaleidoscope that may factor or function to a different angular change on another kaleidoscope, so you get two separate pictures that you then have that are flashing back and forth.
Okay.
But yes.
Okay, so
best analogy to that.
Is there an interface with a computer to get these readouts in terms of probability?
Yeah, in fact, there's a deinterlacing system which they used to actually deinterlace the flashing back and forth of the two probabilities, or the multiples that they had at certain times when it starts skipping.
You could freeze them, right? So you could look at them closer.
Well, what they did is they deinterlaced the video and then reintegrated the video and watched the individual videos then.
Yes.
And then determined statistically how much time was spent on each video to determine the amount of probability of each event occurring. And they tested that against probabilities in the field and probabilities of future occurrence to get a system which functioned scientifically. And that's...
Okay, so, well, I'm going to go with that, and I'm going to actually say what they might have been doing is then looking back to see, in other words, if they saw an event in the looking glass, all they had to do was calibrate or look at the different possibilities, see which one happened, and then... That's
what they did.
As time went on.
Absolutely. That's right on. That's right on.
Yeah.
That is right on the beam.
Okay.
And you know, some people, like I said, some people say it's blue smoke and mirrors. But then again, I was told something in 2001 that's I'm living in right now.
Okay.
Okay, without going to what it is.
Absolutely.
And like I said, we'll talk about that in the future. But you know, it's the best scientific equipment that I can imagine for the determining of such a thing. Mm-hmm. But it goes to the old question: just because we have the power to do something, should we?
Sure.
And I am a 100% advocate. She and I had a more than a small dust-up out at Frenchman Mountain over this very same thing, which actually resulted in me walking alone down Lake Mead back toward Las Vegas, with she and I yelling and screaming at each other along the roadside. They were doing tests out at Frenchman Mountain during the time that the Rosen Bridge was being accessed there, the Einstein-Rosen Bridge, with the equipment. They had the curtains up and all of that business, and up where Metro couldn't see it from the top of the mountain and all of that, and they were accessing there, and there was a mistake and a small explosion out there on the east side of this little, what we call the Conquistador helmet, and she wanted me to go out there with her to help clean some of the evidence up of it, and she and I got in more of a little dust up because I didn't want anything to do with it, because I don't believe, I'm no Luddite, I mean, I'm all for grand technology, but I don't believe in playing with things which actually deal with looking into the future. And there's another issue that was going on at the time, in fact, that the variety of communication which was going on via this equipment from elsewhere, I presume she will still won't admit to me, but I presume that it was from Orion, and it was information, defense-related information on how this type of equipment, how an Einstein-Rosen bridge at a distance could be used to pull information out of a defense computer system. Uh-huh. And I don't mean a U.S. defense computer system. And I said, you know what? No. Look, we've got the technology here, we've got the talent, we've got the willpower, and we've got the willing to defend our own country without the use of something involving time technology. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't want to go up against, for instance, God help us, the Chinese on the ground. But at the same time, I don't fear their country either. I believe that we should be diplomatic with them and have a firm understanding and a respect for one another. But I also don't fear them. And so the use of a technology like that is not honorable to me.
Right. Well, it's like knowing how the game plays out means you can play your advantage ahead of time, mm-hmm. and making sure that eventuality will occur.
That's why I was so interested in when I was doing my time with the jobs involving safety and security training and all of that here in Las Vegas, when I was interacting with Marcia and the Eye, because we were literally on a daily basis talking about that same thing, and about the psychology of individuals who come to a table to play a game and who cheat to alter the outcome of the game. And that whole psychology, it's something which I'm not, is not foreign to me. And so that helped, if you will, prime the wick of the explosion between myself and that variety of technology, which actually primed my disagreement with it.
Okay, well, I understand what you're saying, and there's a million questions that all of this generates.
Oh, I know.
I know we don't have all night, but I would like to ask.
Yeah, there's 30 of them here.
Knowing, but now that I know what I know and what you've at least communicated, you're saying you don't want to use the looking glass for advantage over country to country, but what about country to off-world?
No. It shouldn't be used at all.
I understand, but
all right.
But is there something there? I mean, in other words, is this technology something that they are using now to look at our relationships with, because they've been
the technology is not being used at all right now.
Okay, but the reason it's not used now is because of where we're going into the galactic, the plane of the...
As of about 2017, I would expect probably that all of these little pieces of equipment will probably all get reassembled, yeah.
Turned back on.
Oh, sure.
2017? That's quite a while.
2016, 2017.
Oh, not until then?
Probably not.
Meaning?
I'm figuring that they're probably going to act conservatively on this. That's what all of the people of wisdom have suggested to them.
Oh, wow.
Is to act conservatively. That, yes, the so-called cycle of catastrophe or season of catastrophe of Falconelli, the time period from, right around 1992 to right around 2012, right around that area, while we will have passed 2012, we really ought to get through the entire cycle, which is about 1980 to about 2016, to feel confident that the interpretation from the timeline from the future about their own catastrophe is not off by a few years. We're talking about 45,000 years or 52,000 years respectively. We have difficulty understanding what happened 2,000 years ago. And we're talking about 50,000 years here. So it's very wise for them to wait.
Okay, and you mean the looking glasses are now decommissioned, but also the STARGATE technology?
Yeah, they're decommissioned, and the STARGATEs and the looking glasses, I'm sure they're all in their little mothballed containers and all of that, and they have been separated. The three components of each have been separated and moved to different power structures, diplomatic and military authorities in the world. And we're talking about the EU specifically, the UN and NATO. Those are in specific control of one of the three components each. And I cannot comment as to which component is contained by whom.
Okay, but you're saying there's no doubt whatsoever that all this technology has been decommissioned.
There is no doubt whatsoever when it comes to the looking glasses and when it comes to the STARGATE technology that it has been decommissioned. And however, there are a few threats going on, ongoing threats from present countries stating that they will put it together at their will, do their own self-determination. And those countries, if push comes to shove, will be shoved.
Okay, meaning put it together now?
As in build one themselves now.
Yes, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, what was extant has been collected. I'm under very good assurance that what was sitting there has now been collected and decommissioned.
Okay, and we're assuming Iraq is one of those.
Oh, absolutely.
Basically, they were able to pinpoint in the looking glass the very highest probability for those things to occur.
That's true. That's true. And Bill was asking about a future date involving another thing, and a year was given to me. And he was saying, well, if a year can be provided for that,
right,
why wouldn't a year be provided for the other? Well, there was a highest probability year. for it. However, telling me about something that might happen in the future involving a project which we're currently involved is one matter.
Sure.
Willy-nilly throwing a date out, which is a probability, involving the lives and the destiny of all of us here on the earth, and specifically to a predicted 4.5 or 4 billion people death, is another matter.
Okay.
That carries an entire different weight with it.
But are we to assume that we've passed that year yet? Or is that still
you're not
up
to no, you're not to assume.
No. Okay, so that's still in the offing. What we're looking at is a very low probability of the event or the set of events occurring.
Yes.
At this point.
Yes, we're looking at a low probability of the higher catastrophic portion of the events occurring. I expect that the events which would kick it off are still going to happen. For instance, the solar max, which is coming at around 2012, and the expected loss of GPS equipment and things like that, which is out there as part of on the web. You can find that as Engadget, I think, was one of the groups that spoke about the loss of GPS and satellite communication.
Meaning the electromagnetic grid is going to go down.
Yes, yes, okay. And that would be the time that I would expect the highest probability of the T2 event having correlated to the history of the J-Rods and the Orions. But that's as far as I can.
Wow. Okay, well that's pretty close.
I can't give a date though.
Yeah, I understand.
I can, but I shouldn't. Because people will then target toward a date, and there are people out there now that are saying, "Oh, it's right around the corner, at any moment now. Why won't the aliens save us?"
Yeah,
we need to save ourselves.
Okay,
and that's why the steps have been taken in the world and are still underway, so that we will save ourselves.
All right, folks, that was fascinating. We're going to do part 2 next week. We are pressed for time right now. We have a meeting with an interviewee coming up here in like 10 minutes, you guys. So just briefly, let's make it quick. Give you guys thoughts on these each, and then we'll wrap it up in about 5. And then we'll get ready I'll send the link for everybody for the other Zoom meeting with the interviewee we have. Anybody want to chime in? Unmute your mics.
Wow, that was absolutely fascinating. I enjoyed it.
I thought so too. I've been looking into this subject matter for well over 24 plus years. But I remember when I came across this information about 10, 15 years ago, and I got very, very well versed in it. I'm also very well versed in the Bob Lazar information as well. There's a lot of tie-ins to that with the Dan Burisch bit. It's quite fascinating, I think. Even if we can't verify some of it, it definitely makes you think, on a whole different, makes you open your mind a bit. And I see what he's talking about as far as the technology goes and how it could work. I mean, it makes sense the way he's describing how it functions.
Well, I could see it being possible just because we're energy and it doesn't, you can't create it or destroy it and it always keeps going. Why could you not echo back to yourself?
Right, right. And there's so much that we don't know. It's funny. It's absurd to think that, that modern academia and science is the leading edge or cutting edge. I mean, it's laughable now considering what what a lot of them have been complicit in these last couple of years. But I think it's laughable because, they never want to acknowledge how much they don't know, because we don't know everything. The whole process of science is asking questions. The whole process of, you got your hypothesis, you got your scientific method, all that. There's a reason you have all that. And it's not because, listen to the science. No, it's because science is asking questions, folks. But that's the kind of questions and discussion. I mean, it doesn't matter if we can verify. This is fun. I enjoy this kind of thought, these kind of thought these thought experiments or thought openers. They open your mind a bit to different possibilities. I think that's important. It's good to keep that creative flow going. And it's good to get away from the real subjects of the real world every now and then too, because it can be heavy and really really intense. And it's good to take a step back and relax. And this is one of the ways that some of us do that. Go ahead.
I like how he mentioned aliens. People are asking when are the aliens coming, and that people have to save themselves. That he stated,
Yeah.
We have to save ourselves. There's nobody
Yep.
coming.
Exactly.
I like that. That
And
resonated
he's
with
right
me.
on point.
Yeah.
I agree
I want to
100%.
rewind it and watch it from the beginning because I missed a lot of it. So that might be what I'm going to be doing.
I'm going to send you the link to it on the article.
Okay.
Actually, we have it in the description. It's the hold on one second. It's here we go.
Awesome.
Sending it in the Zoom chat right now, Jen.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I really liked it. That's what resonated with me the most was, everybody keeps asking when are the aliens coming? Well,
They're not going to come until we take responsibility and clean up house on this planet first and foremost.
but
At least that's my take on it.
nobody truly knows when anything's going to happen. But
Right.
he was just pointing out, you need to save yourself. Nobody's saving you. No God is falling from the sky. No Skittles. No rainbows.
No savior. No Messiah.
farts,
We have to
no
save ourselves.
rain, no little trolls or our Ken doll on a white horse is not going to come save us. We have to save ourselves.
Or people blaming it on the on the PTSD. That too.
No family court people are going to save you. No people with child protective services, nor the FBI,
Nobody in the government.
CIA. It's you. Look in the mirror. That's who's going to save you. You.
Yep, 100%. Jessica, what are your 2 cents? Unmute yourself. What are your thoughts?
I feel the same way. Like, nobody's gonna save us. We gotta save ourselves. And it takes work, and not just talking about it, but doing it. And a lot of people don't. They have to just talk because they can't get past, especially people with PTSD. Since you brought it up, can't get past and actually get something accomplished. It's severely hard to get anything accomplished when you've got PTSD.
Right.
So it makes it harder for us to actually get up off of this.
It can be crippling at times. I know that much, just from not technically from my own experience, because I don't have that much. I have a little bit of PTSD but nothing compared to what some people have. And yeah, no, I can totally, it does cripple your ability to do a lot.
Well, fear, being in constant fear paralyzes us. It keeps us in a state of paralysis, paralyzed, whatever that word is, to where you can't do anything, you're afraid, and you're hyper vigilant, to where you'll look around, you'll make sure all the exits, are near. So if you have to leave, if you have to duck out real quick, and you're constantly casing your surroundings to make sure you have a way out.
Oh yeah, and on the same token,
well, I think
PTSD. Oh, go ahead, Jessica.
I was just gonna say, I think that's where a lot of the trolls come from, and is where they got all the fear inside of them, and it's making them paranoid even against each other so much that they can't even trust another person to try to do anything.
Right, and and on the same token, yeah, PTSD can be crippling, but it's still not a justification to use as an excuse for bad behavior either.
Right.
Well, any kind of form of control, as far as, you got religion and you got the Bible and you got thou shalt not, you hear that, and they try to use that, what you shall not do, and they use it as a pawn to make it okay and accepting of what they do, of any kind of cruel act, certain religions, let's just go into the confession stand, or let's just go and ask for forgiveness and our God will give it to us. It's a manipulation tactic.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you with when it comes to that aspect of it, when people are using it as an excuse and a manipulation tactic, come 100%. So that was a great one. I can't wait till part two. Part two is going to be even more intense. I'm going to get some more documents together. I have some stuff on one of my old hard drives that I was looking into for a project I was working on years ago, and I got some really good detailed specs on that looking glass device and this other document. I just got to find it, but we'll have it for you guys next week on part two of the introduction to the Dan Burisch information and Project Looking Glass. Thank you everybody for jumping on. We appreciate it, and thank you for watching to all our viewers. We'll see you next week. And Friday we're going to be doing a follow-up episode, kind of like follow-up to the government big tech episode we did, but it's going to be on the inventor of email and his battle with being cancel cultured, and his what he's revealed through his lawsuit about collusion between government and big tech to rig certain things, like cancel certain vocal opposition to their particular political persuasion, so to speak. So yeah, we got to follow up to the government big tech collusion. There's a lot going on. Go ahead, Jessica.
Oh, I was gonna say another thing is in order to help ourselves, we need to educate ourselves, which is what we're trying to do here, is help everybody get educated.
Yep. And we're not ever, here's the number one thing I want people to understand. There's been claims by others that are not paying attention about, to all the context of what we're putting out, and they're making claims that we are making claims ourselves, which we are not. We're looking at the information, and we are trying to teach people to use critical thinking, discernment, and problem solving skills too, so that they can have the tools to figure out a lot of this information for themselves. We're trying to teach people here. And there may be times where we do some solid evidence-based reporting, but when we are stating our opinion, we always make it clear that that's what we're doing. We have a disclaimer at the beginning for that very reason. We always try to verbally vocalize it if we are doing so and expressing said opinion. We cover our bases quite thoroughly. So some people that are making these claims just aren't paying attention. They're just not looking at everything we're putting out and taking it way out of context, and that's not okay. Because certain people have attacked my team verbally and psychologically, and that's not okay. You come at my team, you're coming after me, as far as I'm concerned.
That's just something that you say, or that's something you do not say. So we shouldn't have to say it. We just do it. So we just should leave it at that.
Exactly. No, I agree 100%.
So let's close it up. Good all right.
Oh yeah. No, we got to wrap it up anyway. We got a Zoom meeting here in any minute, so we should wrap it up.
Have a good night.
Thank you everybody for jumping on. We'll see you next week for part 2.